So how you doing? Hey, today we are going to work on Bodie's XL-76. See if we can get it to the point of making the first cuts. She's having some different issues, so forth and so on. But we're going to see if we can get her into the wood. We're going to set up a salt buck and everything. So I don't know how long this video is going to be, but we got some cool stuff going on. Definitely a lot of troubleshooting with Bodie's XL-76. So, hey, I hope you enjoy it. The high-speed circuit's not allowing enough fuel. So I think I'm going to go in and do a metering lever adjustment real quick. See if we can get that to flow enough fuel. All right, so I did a metering lever adjustment. So if I did everything right, she should be a lot richer right now. So let's find out. That's a very interesting result. She's still lean. And that would mean that this 266 carburetor will not keep up with my ported Homelite. So I might actually have to drill this carburetor and open up the ports a little bigger to get more fuel. Huh. Very, very interesting. Was not expecting that. Now this thing is running perfectly now. Absolutely flawless. I'm just not getting enough fuel on the high speed, on the high side. So we got to fix that. Let's see what we come up with. You know what, before we get into this carburetor, I just filled the tank up. Let's just see if by some chance the fuel line isn't all the way into the bottom of the tank. She wasn't all the way empty, but she was down to the last, say, third or so. Maybe a quarter. Let's just see by some chance that the saw is behaving like that because it's like out of gas and I just let her get too low. That would just mean that the fuel line is a little short and not running all the way down into the bottom, because the fuel line has to kind of wrap around and get underneath in order to get to the bottom. So I didn't pull it out. We'll see. I just topped off the tank. Let's just see if that makes a difference. We're doing one more experiment here before I pull this carb apart and start modifying. I put that pipe on that I've been playing with, trying to come up with like a silencer setup on it. Let's see how she runs with that, just in case. I'm curious if this thing is just so free-flowing that it's throwing all that fuel out the exhaust. You know what I mean? We just had a failure of some sort in there. We'll have to figure that out. All right, so I did a few things this time around. Got the clutch fixed. It just spun off. That was nothing big. None of the parts got lost. It just came loose. The nice thing about these clutch covers is there's not enough room for everything to come off. So all it can do is get loose, you know? So that's all that happened there. I think the torque of the saw is pretty good. And she might want to come off on us again until I get it in the wood. Once I get this thing in the wood, that clutch will tighten all the way up and, you know, we won't have any issues. But for some reason, she wants to come off. So, you know, it is what it is. But I also got tired of playing with these mufflers, so I put the muffler on that I plan on running on this saw for Bodie. So we're going to go ahead and do the muffler swap, put the Homelite muffler on there and run it with that muffler. I took the stack off. It is loud. It's kind of annoying. and it's kind of getting to me a little bit. So I just went ahead and put the factory muffler on. Might lose a few RPM, but it's not a lot. I mean, I've done enough that I know that you lose a little bit, but it's not a whole lot. But it's the biggest difference is that it is quieter. Now, as far as the carburetor is concerned, so I found a bunch of debris at the fuel inlet screen and everywhere. So I got it all cleaned up. I'll probably look at the gas tank and the fuel line here in a second, just to make sure everything's good. So I cleaned it all out, and that might have been the reason that this thing was run a little lean. Now, I also did just another little tiny metering lever adjustment to try to get a little bit more fuel from that as well. So we're all back together. We're ready to give it another try. I just hope the chain stays on, because I don't know. I'm not certain I got that clutch tight enough. So let's see what happens. That is much more pleasant to the ears now. Here's what I discovered. I basically touched everything I could do in the carb and all that stuff, and everything makes you believe she's running lean as soon as you open it up full throttle. But here's what I actually think is going on. I actually believe what we're seeing here is the reeds are not capable of operating properly once the RPM gets up to around 12,000 RPM. I think what we're seeing is reed flutter. So what we got to do is not even think about the way this thing operates outside of the cut, because it's not going to behave correctly. I think we're going to have to tune it in the cut, and we're going to have to make sure it stays below 11,000 RPM in the cut. If we do that, if, like, say we get her tuned around 10,000 RPM in the cut, you know, in maybe the mid nines, say 95 to 10,000 in the cut, I think is where we're going to end up here. As long as we're tuned in there, the reed flutter should only be an issue when this thing is, you know, outside of the wood at full throttle. But in the wood, I think the reeds are going to be okay up to around 95, 10,000 RPM. Now, for us to go higher than that in RPM, I think we're going to have to look at a different reed setup altogether, do a bunch of modifications. So I think I'm fairly certain that's what's going on. Now, we can go to a heavier reed material, which I have some here. I've already done that experiment a long time ago. The reed material is too stiff for the size, the physical size of the reed. If the reed itself was larger, it would be okay, I think. But the reeds are so small that this reed material is just too stiff, and they don't want to open. So what you end up with is extremely sluggish, very low power. It's just not pushing enough through, you know what I mean? Maybe with a pipe it would work better, but without a pipe, you know, that reed material just won't work. So I think if we want to try to go higher than this in RPM, we're going to have to go to a completely different intake setup, reed cage, the whole 9 yards. But let's work at trying to get this thing tuned in the wood. We're going to aim for around 95 to 10,000 RPM, because then it should operate just fine. Alrighty, so that's where we're headed. All right, so I just drug this little bit of log here out of the woods. I made a video thinking it was maple. That's definitely ash though. See my drag line? There's still 2 more sections up there, but we're going to use that to start testing on Bodie's XL-76. So I'm going to take these pieces of firewood, set them up, set this all up for like a sawbuck. So, and we'll use this area just for saw testing, making cookies. You know what I mean? And I got a tree stump sitting there, so I'll burn the cookies right there on that tree stump. That way it'll make that disappear too. So anything we get drug over here gets used for testing. I'm not gonna put all my good wood here for testing, but it's good enough for testing some salts. So let's go ahead and work at making our little salt buck and get Bodie's salt tested. All right, it's pretty obvious that carb's not keeping up. I was hoping there's going to be some reed issues, which I know there are, but it's obvious that carb's not keeping up. So we're going to have to look at modifying it. There's no option there. So that's what we're going to have to do. But I'm not going to be able to do it today. So, you know, it is what it is. So I'm going to grab another saw and work at getting this saw buck put together. Alright, there she is, ready for some salt testing. Might need to make the notch a little wider, but she holds it, you know. We're good for some salt testing. Now if you've seen me do this bore cut on this saw, that's because this is the one I plan on dropping that oak with. And you don't want your chain very aggressive for a bore cut. This tree is going to need bore cut. So, you know, I showed you a bunch of methods about sharpening your chain, keeping them cutting really quick and fast. Well, if you're talking about bore cutting, you want to ignore some of that. So keep that in mind. Alrighty. Well, that'll be it for today. You know, it is what it is. We tried to get Bodie's saw up and running, but we definitely got to do some more work to it. She's just starving for fuel. We'll look. If that fuel inlet screen is plugged again, then we got tank issues or fuel filter issue. And I'll be honest, like whenever I first started it, it ran great on the bench, but whenever I got it here on the wood, it seemed like it was running differently. You tell me if you think the same thing, which tells me we might have a fuel filter or fuel tank issue or some sort. We'll check that stuff out before we dig into that carb more. I just got this feeling that something else is going on. And the only way to tell is to take another look at that fuel inlet screen, you know? We might have even got debris through the screen and plugged up some of the orifices inside the carb. She was pretty packed, so that's also a possibility. So, yeah, we'll have to work on it again one of these days and see if we can get her going better. Alrighty, catch you on the next one. Later.